My trans teacher yelled at me in front of the whole class, just because I said, there's only two genders. She called me transphobic, hit me with a ruler, and tried to humiliate me. I voice recorded everything, and sued her for $50,000. 2 weeks later, she showed up at our door, sobbing. I go to a high school in Southern California, and used to absolutely love it here. But 1 month ago, a new teacher transferred here and changed everything, and right from the get-go, it was obvious that she was trans. In her first lecture, she told us that her pronouns were she, her, and that we can't refer to her with any other pronouns. The rest of the lecture was spent discussing the importance and meaning of pronouns. I just thought that it was an introductory lecture and didn't think much of it. She was going to teach us math next time, and I was really excited because I like solving problems. But the next day, she opened up a slideshow about LGBT history and began teaching that. I raised my hand and asked her if we weren't going to study math, but she told me to sit down and not interrupt the class. However, I considered that a valid question, so I asked if she could answer it really quickly. Our first test was in a week, and we needed to be prepared for it. But our teacher, Ms. Wright, just crossed her arms and started calling me transphobic. She claimed that I was purposefully interrupting the class so I wouldn't have to listen to a trans talk. I denied it because my intention was purely based on academics, and I never did anything to suggest that I was transphobic. By this point, most of the class was seeing eye to eye with me and nodding their heads. The Ms. Wright saw that and yelled at the top of her lungs, demanding that we all sit down and just listen. Her voice was so loud that I sat out of sheer fear and didn't say a single word for the rest of the lesson. Little did I know, Ms. Wright had no intentions of shifting from the LGBTQ curriculum. The next day, she pulled up more slides, this time explaining what genders were and how many were there. After 10 minutes, she said that genders are pretty much irrelevant and that we should pay attention to identity instead. I let out an involuntary laugh, but she heard it and told me to stand up. She asked if I was being transphobic again, and I had to hold back a sigh. I was really reaching the limit of my nerves and ended up saying, "Oh, come on, 2 genders are just about enough. Now can we please get on to studying for our tests?" Ms. Wright completely lost it once I said that. She murmured a curse under her breath and told me to come stand next to her. She started yelling right in my face, telling me that my views were extremely narrow-minded and offensive to everyone. I tried to argue, but she would just speak over my words and didn't let me get a single sentence in. Then, she did something unfathomable. She grabbed her ruler and hit my arm with it. I freaked out and said, "This isn't kindergarten where you can do whatever you want. You can't just hit me like that." She laughed and said, "Yes, I can," and was about to hit me again, but I dodged it. Thankfully, the bell rang and she just ran out the door while calling me transphobic again. Little did she know, I actually had a plan this time. You see, my friend had secretly recorded the entire thing on his phone and sent the video to everyone on campus. Later that day, I showed it to my parents. Now, I expected them to be angry, but my dad was literally threatening to end her, so I had to calm him down and show that I wasn't hurt. My parents decided to go to the headmaster's office along with me to get that horrible teacher fired. We told him everything and even showed him the footage. However, to our surprise, the headmaster refused to do anything. He said that his hands are tied and he can't fire the teacher without any solid proof. Apparently, video footage of a teacher assaulting a student and yelling in his face wasn't solid enough proof for him. I was about to say something when my dad told me to be quiet and just took us out of the office. I asked him what was going on and why he was so calm all of a sudden. He said that just like me, he had also recorded the headmaster's voice saying that. My mom immediately realized that we had enough proof to file a lawsuit against the school for negligence and against my teacher for emotional abuse. We went to a lawyer and the very next day filed a lawsuit seeking $50,000 from them. Looks like the school administration realized we were serious and the trans teacher was fired before the day was over. However, nothing could stop the lawsuit at this point. The next day, I went to school after filing the lawsuit. I was instantly called to the guidance counselor's office. Ms. Thompson, our guidance counselor, who I'd always liked, looked uncomfortable as she closed her door. "Jordan, I wanted to check in on you. I understand there's been some difficulty with Ms. Wright's class." I nodded, not sure how much I should say. "Several students have come forward with similar concerns," she continued. "I want you to know the administration is taking this very seriously now." What she said next shocked me. Apparently, after our meeting with the principal, 4 other students and their parents had complained about Ms. Wright's behavior. 2 of them had also recorded incidents in her classroom. The school board had gotten involved, and they were conducting a formal investigation. I left her office feeling slightly better, but still worried about the lawsuit. That evening, our doorbell rang. It was Quinn, a senior I knew from math club, along with 3 other students I recognized from Ms. Wright's class. "We heard what happened," Quinn said. "We want to help." They all had stories similar to mine, being called transphobic for asking curriculum questions, getting yelled at for trivial things, and being forced to sit through lectures that had nothing to do with mathematics. 2 of them had recordings on their phones. My parents invited them in, and soon our living room was filled with teenagers sharing their experiences. My mom called Linda, who listened intently, and told us this changed everything. With multiple witnesses and additional evidence, our case was even stronger. By Tuesday, our house had become like lawsuit headquarters. Linda had printed out these forms for everyone to document their experiences with Ms. Wright. Quinn and the others came back with 3 more students who'd been in different class periods. They all had similar stories that made my blood boil. This girl named Melissa said Ms. Wright had made her stand in the corner for an entire period because she asked if they could review for the upcoming test. My friend Riley was basically running PR for our little rebellion. She'd created a group chat for all of us to coordinate our statements and share evidence. We had a total of 7 recordings now from different days, all showing Ms. Wright either going off on tangents about gender theory or yelling at students for asking about actual math. "I can't believe she hit you with a ruler though," Melissa said while filling out her statement. "That's next level crazy." I rubbed my arm where the mark had finally faded. "Yeah, I think she just completely lost it when I questioned her." My parents were being super supportive through all this. Mom was organizing all the statements and evidence, while Dad made sure everyone had snacks. I heard him telling Quinn's mom on the phone that these kids are standing up for themselves in a way that makes me proud. Wednesday morning, I got called to the office during first period. Principal Davidson was sitting there with a woman in a business suit who turned out to be the district's legal counsel. They asked me to go over the events again while she took notes. I could tell they were trying to find holes in my story, so I stuck to exactly what happened and mentioned we had everything on video. The lawyer lady kept interrupting with questions like, "And you're certain you weren't disrupting the class intentionally? And had you made any prior comments about Ms. Wright's gender identity?" It felt like I was the one on trial. I finally got frustrated and said, "Look, I just wanted to learn math in math class. That's it." Principal Davidson cleared his throat uncomfortably when I mentioned our lawsuit, and the meeting ended pretty quickly after that. As I was leaving, I overheard the lawyer say something about negotiating a resolution before this escalates further. By lunchtime, the whole school was buzzing with rumors. Someone had started a ridiculous story that I was getting $1 million and the school was shutting down. I had to keep telling people it wasn't that dramatic. Riley sat with me and showed me some messages she'd gotten from students in Ms. Wright's other classes who wanted to come forward too. "This is getting huge, Jordan," she said. "Someone even made a TikTok about it." I nearly choked on my sandwich. "Please tell me I'm not in it." She patted my arm. "Relax, it's just some dramatic reenactment with text overlays, but it has like 3,000 views already." After school, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Ms. Wright. My hand started shaking as I read it. "You've made a huge mistake. I was only trying to educate you all. You'll regret this attack on me." I immediately showed it to my parents, who called Linda. She told us to save the message and not respond, then added intimidation of a witness to our growing list of complaints. I blocked the number, but felt uneasy for the rest of the night. Thursday was even weirder. Ms. Thompson pulled me aside in the hallway and whispered that the school board was meeting that evening to discuss our case and that I might want to prepare a statement. When I asked why she was telling me this, she just said, "Not everyone agrees with how this has been handled," and walked away. Riley and I stayed after school to work on our statements, making sure to stick to the facts. I focused on how Ms. Wright had completely abandoned the curriculum and become hostile when questioned. Riley wrote about how the classroom environment had become intimidating and how students were falling behind in math. On the way home, we noticed a small group of people holding signs near the school entrance. As we got closer, I could see they were protesting in support of Ms. Wright. Their signs had messages like, "Protect trans teachers," and "Stop teenage bigotry." One woman pointed at me and started shouting that I was canceling a marginalized educator for expressing her identity. Riley pulled me away before I could say anything. "Don't engage. They don't know what actually happened." I felt sick to my stomach. This wasn't about Ms. Wright being trans at all. It was about her hitting me and not teaching the subject she was hired to teach. But now, people were twisting everything around. When we got to my house, there were 3 news vans parked out front. Actual reporters with microphones and cameras. I froze on the sidewalk, but my mom came rushing out and ushered us inside. Apparently, someone had leaked details of our lawsuit to the local news, and they were trying to get a statement. Linda arrived 20 minutes later, looking frazzled. "This is getting out of hand," she told my parents. "The school district is trying to control the narrative by painting this as an anti-transgender witch hunt, rather than addressing the actual misconduct." She helped us draft a simple statement that focused solely on Ms. Wright's failure to teach the curriculum and her inappropriate behavior, with no mention of her gender identity. My dad read it to the reporters while I stayed inside, watching through the window. That night, I made the mistake of checking social media. There were at least 3 different hashtags about the situation, with people arguing on both sides, most of whom had no idea what actually happened. Some random adult I'd never met tweeted that I was a teenage bigot looking for attention, and it had hundreds of likes. I showed it to my mom, who immediately took my phone away and told me to stay off social media completely. "These people don't know you," she said. "They don't know what happened. Don't let them get in your head." Friday morning was the most surreal yet. I walked into school to find students wearing homemade badges, some saying, "I stand with Jordan," and others saying, "I stand with Ms. Wright." The whole thing had split the school into factions. Quinn and a few others from math club surrounded me like bodyguards, walking me to my first class. "This is insane," I whispered to Quinn. "I just wanted to learn calculus." Quinn nodded. "That's why we're supporting you. This isn't about anything except a teacher who wasn't doing her job and then went ballistic when called out on it." During third period, an announcement came over the intercom for all students involved in the Wright incident to report to the auditorium. About 20 of us filed in to find the superintendent and the entire school board sitting at a long table on stage. Principal Davidson stood nervously to the side. The superintendent, Dr. Mendez, spoke first. "We've reviewed the evidence submitted regarding Ms. Wright's conduct, including video recordings and student statements. statements. I want to thank you all for your courage in coming forward. My heart was pounding so hard, I could barely focus on his words. Was this actually happening? The district has made the decision to terminate Ms. Wright's employment, effective immediately, he continued. We've also accepted Principal Davidson's resignation. A murmur went through our group. Principal Davidson was resigning? I glanced over and saw him staring at the floor, his face red. Dr. Mendez went on to explain that an independent investigation had revealed that Principal Davidson had received multiple complaints about Ms. Wright from other teachers, but had ignored them. The school board had ultimately pressured him to resign for his negligence in handling the situation. The revelation made me angry all over again. This whole thing could have been prevented if he'd just done his job. We will be appointing an interim principal while we conduct a proper search, Dr. Mendez said. And Ms. Jackson from the math department will be taking over your advanced math class starting Monday. It felt like a strange victory, but also not really the end. The lawsuit was still ongoing, and now there were all these people who thought I was some kind of villain in this story. When I got home that afternoon, Linda was waiting with my parents at the kitchen table. She had a stack of papers in front of her and a serious expression. The school district has offered a settlement, she said, sliding a document toward us. They're willing to pay the full $50,000, but with conditions. I leaned forward to listen as she explained. The district would pay, but we would have to sign a non-disclosure agreement about the details. They didn't want this becoming a bigger story than it already was. I don't know, my dad said, frowning. It feels like they're trying to buy our silence. Linda nodded. That's exactly what they're doing. But you should also consider that a trial would be very public and potentially difficult for Jordan. They all looked at me, waiting for my opinion. It was weird to have adults actually caring what I thought. What about the other students? I asked. Are they getting settlements too? Linda smiled slightly. I've been coordinating with the attorneys representing the other families. The district has made similar offers to each student who filed complaints. I thought about it for a minute. I don't want to drag this out forever, but I also don't want them to just throw money at the problem without fixing anything. That's a fair concern, Linda said. We could counter with additional non-monetary demands, like implementing better procedures for handling teacher misconduct, or regular curriculum reviews to ensure teachers are actually teaching their subjects. My parents exchanged a look, and my mom nodded. I think that's an excellent idea. This was never about the money anyway. Over the weekend, Linda worked on our counter-proposal. Meanwhile, I couldn't go anywhere without people staring at me. A trip to the mall turned into an awkward situation when two different groups of students from school spotted me and either came over to high-five me or glared from a distance. Sunday evening, we were all sitting in the living room watching a movie when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Ms. Wright standing on our porch. My blood ran cold. I need to speak with you, she said. She looked completely different, wearing jeans and a sweatshirt with her hair pulled back. Her voice was calmer than I'd ever heard it. I started to close the door, but my dad appeared behind me. You need to leave, now. Ms. Wright held up her hands. Please, just 5 minutes. I came to apologize. My parents exchanged a look, and to my surprise, my mom nodded. 5 minutes, in the living room, with us present. We all sat awkwardly, while Ms. Wright perched on the edge of our armchair. She took a deep breath. What I did was inexcusable, she began. I was going through a difficult personal time, and I took it out on my students. That doesn't justify my behavior, but I want you to know it wasn't about you, Jordan. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. I've been struggling with how people perceive me since my transition, she continued. But using my classroom as a platform for my personal issues was wrong, and hitting you, she shook her head. I can't believe I did that. I'm deeply ashamed. My mom crossed her arms. Why are you telling us this now? Ms. Wright looked down at her hands. The district offered me a small severance package if I resign voluntarily instead of fighting the termination. But I need to make amends first. I came here to take responsibility for my actions and to tell you I won't contest your lawsuit. It was so strange hearing her speak normally, without yelling or making accusations. I found myself believing her sincerity, but still feeling angry about everything that had happened. I appreciate your apology, I said finally, but you really hurt a lot of students, not just me. We were all struggling in your class because you weren't teaching us anything we needed to know. She nodded. I know. I've written apology letters to each student, which I'll be sending out tomorrow. I just wanted to deliver yours in person. After she left, we all sat in silence for a few minutes. I felt confused, like I should still be angry, but also like holding on to that anger wasn't going to help anyone. That was unexpected, my dad finally said. My mom nodded. People are complicated, Jordan. What she did was wrong, but at least she owned up to it in the end. Monday morning, Linda called with news. The school district had accepted our counter-proposal. They would pay the settlement and implement new policies, including a clear procedure for reporting teacher misconduct, regular curriculum reviews, and training for administrators on handling complaints appropriately. They're also appointing a student representative to the school board, Linda said, and they want to know if you'd be interested in being the first one. I was shocked. Me? Why would they want me after all this? Because you stood up for what was right, even when it was difficult, Linda explained. That's exactly the kind of perspective they need. I told her I'd think about it. When I got to school, there was a substitute in math class who actually taught us calculus. It felt like going back in time to how school was supposed to be. At lunch, Riley showed me her phone. The local news had run a story about the settlement with the headline, "School District Implements New Policies Following Teacher Misconduct Case." They didn't even mention you by name, Riley said. And look, no mention of Ms. Wright being transgender either. They just focused on the actual issue. I felt relieved. Maybe this whole thing would finally start to die down. After school, I found Quinn waiting by my locker. Have you heard? They're interviewing candidates for the permanent math teacher position next week, and they're having students sit in on the interviews. Really? That's new. Quinn nodded. Your lawsuit is already changing things around here. The administration is actually listening to students now. As we walked out of the building, I noticed the protest signs were gone. Instead, there was a banner announcing student council elections with the slogan, "Make your voice heard." That evening, I sat down with my parents and told them I wanted to accept the position as student representative on the school board. Are you sure? My dad asked. It's a big commitment, and there might still be people who give you a hard time about the lawsuit. I nodded. I'm sure. This whole thing taught me that speaking up actually matters. If I can help make sure something like this doesn't happen again, I want to do it. My mom smiled proudly. I think it's a wonderful idea. The next day, Dr. Mendez called to officially offer me the position. He explained that I would attend monthly board meetings and provide input on decisions affecting students. My first meeting would be the following week. One more thing, he said before hanging up. The settlement checks are being processed. Your families should arrive by Friday. I thanked him, feeling strange about the money aspect. I hadn't even thought about what I would do with my portion of it. My parents had already decided to put most of theirs toward my college fund, but said I could decide what to do with my share. That afternoon, I ran into Ms. Thompson in the hallway. She smiled warmly at me. I heard about your new position on the school board. Congratulations. Thanks, I said. I'm nervous about it though. She nodded understanding. That's natural. But you know what? Sometimes the most important changes happen because ordinary people stand up when something isn't right. That's all you did. I thought about her words all day. I hadn't set out to start a movement or change school policies. I just wanted to learn math in math class. But somehow, one small stand had turned into something much bigger. By Friday, things at school had finally started to feel normal again. The new math teacher, Ms. Jackson, was fantastic, clear, knowledgeable, and actually focused on teaching us calculus. I was finally catching up on all the material we'd missed. After school, I walked home with Riley and Quinn, discussing our upcoming test. It's kind of crazy, Riley said. Remember when all we wanted was for Ms. Wright to teach us some actual math equations? And now the whole school system is changing because of it. Quinn laughed. Yeah, Jordan accidentally became a school reform activist by asking to learn calculus. I shook my head. I still can't believe how out of control everything got. All I did was ask a question. Sometimes that's all it takes, Quinn said. One person asking, "Hey, this isn't right. Can we fix it?" When I got home, there was a large envelope waiting for me on the kitchen table. Inside was a check for $10,000, my portion of the settlement, along with a formal letter from the school district acknowledging the inappropriate classroom conduct and affirming their commitment to the new policies we'd requested. I stared at the check for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. The money felt strange in my hands, like a weird souvenir from a crazy experience I never wanted to have again. That evening, I made a decision. I called Riley and Quinn and asked them to meet me at the coffee shop near school. When they arrived, I explained my idea. I want to use the settlement money to start a student advocacy group, I told them. Something that helps give students a voice when they're not being heard. We could offer support, document issues, maybe even provide small scholarships for students who need to take additional classes to catch up when a teacher fails them. Riley's eyes widened. That's actually a brilliant idea. Quinn nodded enthusiastically. We could call it the equation, because we're trying to solve the problems in the system. I smiled. It felt right, taking something negative and turning it into something that could actually help other students. Let's do it, I said. We can start planning this weekend. As I walked home that evening, I realized something important. Standing up for what's right isn't always easy or comfortable. Sometimes it makes you the center of unwanted attention, but sometimes it's the only way things ever change. I spent the entire weekend planning the equation with Riley and Quinn. We sketched out ideas on my kitchen table while my mom kept bringing us snacks. Quinn's older sister is in law school, so she helped us figure out how to set up a proper nonprofit organization. Turns out there's a ton of paperwork involved, but we were determined to make this happen. We should add Melissa to the committee, Riley suggested while doodling logo ideas. She's good at organizing stuff. I nodded in agreement. And maybe we could ask Ms. Thompson to be our faculty advisor? She was pretty much the only staff member who supported us from the beginning. By Sunday night, we had a solid plan. Use half my settlement money as starting funds, create a website where students could report issues anonymously, and hold monthly meetings to address concerns. The remaining money would go toward scholarships for students who needed to take summer classes to catch up on material they missed because of bad teaching. Monday morning rolled around, and I was feeling pretty good about everything until I walked into school. There was a small group of students handing out flyers by the entrance. The headline read, "Justice for Ms. Wright. Stop the witch hunt." I grabbed one and saw it was full of completely false information about me. My stomach dropped. The flyer claimed I had deliberately targeted Ms. Wright because she was transgender and that I had fabricated the entire story. It even suggested the videos had been edited. I immediately crumpled it up and looked around for whoever was distributing this garbage. I spotted Michael Evans, a senior I barely knew, handing them out. I stormed over to him, my hands shaking. "What is this?" I demanded, holding up the crumpled flyer. "None of this is true." Michael crossed his arms. "My cousin is friends with Ms. Wright. She says you're just some conservative kid trying to make her look bad because you're uncomfortable with trans people." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. There are literally videos of her hitting me with a ruler. She wasn't even teaching math in a math class. A small crowd was gathering around us. Great, just what I needed. More drama. Quinn appeared at my side, took one look at the flyer, and pulled me away. "Don't engage," he whispered. "That's exactly what they want." As we walked inside, I noticed Principal Davidson's replacement, Dr. Garcia, watching from the entrance. She'd been appointed as interim principal last week, and I hadn't interacted with her yet. To my surprise, she gestured for us to come over. "I'll need one of those flyers," she said firmly. After Quinn handed her one, she read it quickly, her expression darkening. "This is absolutely unacceptable. Wait here." She marched over to Michael and his friends, confiscated their stack of flyers, and told them to report to her office immediately. I couldn't hear everything she said, but I definitely caught the words defamation and harassment policy. "Well, that's refreshing," Quinn said as we headed to class, an administrator actually doing their job. By lunchtime, the flyers were gone, and Dr. Garcia had made an announcement reminding everyone about the school's policy against spreading false information. I was still annoyed, but it felt good to have someone in authority actually step up right away. After school, I had my first meeting with the school board as student representative. I was nervous as hell walking into the district office. The boardroom had this huge table with 7 serious-looking adults sitting around it. Dr. Mendez introduced me to everyone, and they gave me a binder full of information about current district policies. "We're very pleased to have student input on our decisions moving forward," said Mrs. Patel, the board chairperson, "especially from someone who's demonstrated such advocacy for educational standards." I almost laughed at the formal way she described my whole ordeal, but I managed to keep it together. They had me sit through a 2-hour meeting about budget allocations and facility maintenance schedules. Not gonna lie, it was pretty boring, but I paid attention and took notes. Near the end, they asked if I had any input. I cleared my throat nervously. I was wondering if the board would consider implementing a system for students to provide feedback on teaching quality throughout the semester, not just at the end. That way, problems could be identified before they affect students' education. There was a moment of silence, then Mrs. Patel nodded. "That's actually an excellent suggestion. We'll add it to next month's agenda for further discussion." I left the meeting feeling pretty good about myself. Maybe this position wasn't just symbolic after all. When I got home, there was another surprise waiting. A local news reporter was talking to my parents in the living room. My dad waved me over as I walked in. "Jordan, this is Sarah from Channel 8 News. She's doing a story on the changes happening at Lincoln High." I cautiously sat down, remembering the media circus from before. "I'm not sure I want to be on TV talking about all this." Sarah smiled reassuringly. "I completely understand. We're actually focusing on the positive changes resulting from your case, the new policies, your student advocacy group, the addition of a student representative to the school board. We'd love to include your perspective, but we can keep your name and face out of it if you prefer." I thought about it for a minute. If it's about the positive changes, I guess that would be okay. We talked for about 20 minutes. I explained the equation and our goals for helping students have a voice in their education. Sarah seemed genuinely interested, asking thoughtful questions about what motivated us. It felt weird being interviewed, but also kind of empowering to talk about the good things that came out of such a bad situation. The next day at school, Ms. Thompson agreed to be our faculty advisor for the equation. She even offered to let us use her classroom for meetings after school. "I'm proud of what you're doing," she told me, "taking something negative and turning it into something that helps others, that shows real character." The rest of the week flew by. The new math teacher, Ms. Jackson, was absolutely amazing. She noticed how far behind we were and created a special study guide to help us catch up. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I might actually pass the AP exam at the end of the year. On Friday, the news segment about the changes at our school aired. They kept my face out of it as promised, just showing shots of the school and a brief clip of Quinn and Riley talking about the equation. The reporter emphasized how student advocacy had led to positive reforms. To my relief, there was no mention of Ms. Wright being transgender. The focus was entirely on the inappropriate teaching and behavior. After the segment aired, applications for the equation started flooding in. We received emails from students at other schools asking how they could start similar groups. It was a lot to manage, but Quinn set up a proper website, and Riley created an organization system for all the inquiries. The following Monday, I got called to Dr. Garcia's office. My first thought was, what now? But when I arrived, she was smiling. "I wanted to update you on some changes we're implementing," she said, gesturing for me to sit. "Based on your suggestion to the school board, we're rolling out a mid-semester teacher evaluation system. Students will have the opportunity to provide anonymous feedback, which will be reviewed by department heads." I was honestly shocked. That was fast. The board meeting was just last week, she nodded. "Sometimes the right ideas don't need much deliberation. We're also updating our hiring process for teachers to include demonstration lessons observed by both staff and student representatives." I left her office feeling like I was in some alternate universe where adults actually listened to teenagers. It was weird, but in a good way. 2 weeks later, we held the first official meeting of the equation. Over 30 students showed up, representing every grade level. We outlined our mission and asked for volunteers for different committees. By the end of the meeting, we had teams working on the scholarship program, the reporting system, and outreach to other schools. The settlement check had cleared by then, so I transferred $5,000 to our newly established nonprofit account. Quinn's sister had helped us set everything up, legally, so we could accept additional donations. Riley's dad, who works in marketing, designed professional brochures explaining our purpose. Around this time, I received an unexpected email from Ms. Wright. My finger hovered over the delete button, but curiosity got the better of me. The message was brief. Jordan, I've been following the news about the changes at Lincoln and your new organization. I want you to know that I'm getting the help I needed and am working through my issues. What you're doing is important. Some teachers forget that their job is to educate, not indoctrinate. I wish you success. Minus Ms. Wright. I didn't respond, but I didn't delete it either. It was strange to think that something good had come from such a terrible situation, even for her. By the end of the semester, the equation had become an established presence at Lincoln High. We'd helped 3 students get the academic support they needed after a science teacher had been regularly canceling labs. We'd awarded our first mini scholarship to a freshman who needed summer school after a long-term substitute failed to teach any actual content. The school board adopted all of our suggested policies, and Dr. Garcia was appointed as the permanent principal. The flyer incident turned out to be the only real backlash I faced. Most students either supported what we were doing or just didn't care enough to make a fuss. As for the lawsuit money, I never told anyone at school exactly how much it was. The $5,000 I didn't put into the equation went into my college fund. My parents matched it, so I had a decent start toward tuition. The Channel 8 news story ended up winning some local journalism award, and Sarah occasionally checked in for updates on our progress. Lincoln High became something of a model for student advocacy in the district, with 2 other schools starting similar programs. Looking back on those wild 3 months, it's still kind of hard to believe how quickly everything escalated from me just wanting to learn some calculus to filing a lawsuit and starting a non-profit. But I guess sometimes standing up for something basic like, hey, maybe teach the subject you're hired to teach, can spark bigger changes than you expect. The best part? I ended up getting an A in AP Calculus after all. Ms. Jackson was that good of a teacher.